first gigs in terms of Hollywood back in the 80s in terms of guest appearances?
Absolutely not.
No,
No,
no. Uh,
no. I started in Hollywood in the late 70s.
okay.
So I had been doing a lot of little shows, a lot of network television as guest starring, and I got to be a part of a lot of shows that it didn't have a lot of Black people on them, but I happened to be the flavor of the month, I suppose, and was able to continually work once I finally got to Hollywood in 79.
And Daphne, were you, and you mentioned there about guest appearances during the late 70s and into the 80s. Were you in many Stephen Cannell productions? Was Stephen a prominent, did feature for you in the 80s in terms of guest appearances?
I don't remember who the producers were, but
Mm.
I was on things like Hill Street Blues and oh, uh, something in McCormick.
Okay,
I
okay,
can't
okay.
even remember the names of them. I have to look at my IMDb to say, oh yes, I remember I did that. It was quite a long time ago.
Mm.
And at my age, I don't think my memory goes back deeply into those days. I have spots of very
Mm.
memorable moments back in those days. And definitely the A Team was one of my memorable moments. Um, I was very happily enjoying being selected to be in a
Mm.
television series. I had not intentionally become an actress. It was by chance, and I tended to enjoy it and learned on the job, and it was a success for me. It's not often that you fall into something that you really have a penchant for and it works out. So being on the A Team was fun. I mean, Mr. T was a hot deal back then.
Mm.
And I remember meeting him. He was more shy than I expected him to be.
Mm.
And the episode that you speaking of about Kamara
Yeah.
and Skins, what is vivid in my mind is carrying a monkey on my shoulders for most of the time I was there. It was me and the monkey battling out for who was going to have their hand over my face and what he was going to do as he was sitting on my shoulders. So it was kind of my introduction to working with, I would say, a child.
Okay.
That monkey was like a little child.
And I suppose, Daphne, you mentioned Skins, and I suppose Skins was the big episode that people will remember you from your time in the A Team. But the previous year, you had a small, very small role as a nurse in There's Always a Catch. And obviously, you must have left an impression on the cast of the A Team in terms of that role, because when they invited you back the next time, it was maybe as one of the main guest stars. So the first experience on the A Team, where you were playing that sort of nurses, sort of such, was that sort of a talent agent opportunity that you had got by chance? And tell me,
Probably,
and tell me,
probably.
is
And
that is
when you
those?
have those opportunities, they come with maybe a day or two of work. And most times you don't get to work with the main characters or maybe just one of the main characters. I don't remember who I worked with that day, but I know that it was a very short duration of time.
And I suppose, Daphne, in the second episode, obviously you were the main sort of guest star, as sort of such. So you got to spend a good lot of time with the cast for that maybe week or week and a half that they were sort of shooting that episode. And you mentioned there about your memories of Mr. T and interactions with him. And did you mention about him finding him quite shy? But did you find the second time that you arrived on the set of the A-Team that you were able to strike up conversations with some of the main stars of the show that you probably weren't able to do the first time around?
Well, the second time around, you spend most of your time in your trailer. No, you don't do a lot of interacting with the stars when you're a guest star, unless you're in the scenes with them. So it's not like we were hanging out. You get to do that when you are one of the main characters who comes around more than once in a season. It's not a buddy situation. It's a work situation, and you are in your trailer until they call you to the set. You do your scene, and then you go back to your trailer. The main interaction that I had with Mr. T was on the set. And I remember him being a little hesitant and a little, I guess you would say, trepidatious, if there's such a word, because I had to kiss him. And he was really not comfortable with the fact that I had to kiss him. And I told him to please relax. I was going to kiss him on his head, and he would not have to think that he'd have a romantic interlude with me. And that seemed to kind of calm him down.
Okay, okay. And Daphne, as two of the main villains in that sort of show, and two of the main other guest actors with you were John Quaid and John Calvin, and they appeared on that episode with the A-Team. And in terms of fellow guest actors, when you're appearing on a show, do you get to intermingle? Do the fellow guest actors, do they sit with each other at lunchtime in terms of canteen and sort of stuff like that? Is there a sort of bond between guest actors on a show?
Only if you have known them from other shows, that you know them personally. Usually it's a very solitary being working on a set. You spend a lot of time in your trailer waiting to be called to do your scene. Lunch, you may sit down with the crew, whoever is around. It's not pointedly, we'll all sit together and chat. That just didn't happen back then. It happens more now than it does, because it comes with your confidence as well. I was still new to the business and didn't know any of these people. So I was kind of solitary.
Okay. And Daphne, obviously the A-Team was a big deal all across the United States. Cable TV show premiered all across America, Canada, one of the biggest sort of pullers in terms of TV sort of ratings. When you found that you were going to have that sort of main guest star role in the second episode, was it a really sort of joyful sort of moment for you? Did you tell family, loved ones, and what you recall about the episode airing? Did you go and watch it with a boyfriend at the time? Where did you go? Did you have loved ones over, or when it aired, did you find out the date when it was going to air, and what did you do for that to mark that occasion?
What year was Skins? Do you have that information?
1985, January the 29th, 1985.
I had already done WKRP in Cincinnati, which was a hit, twice. I had become a semi-regular guest star on Simon and Simon, which was also a hit on television. I had been working a lot. A-Team was just another job. And it was nothing to celebrate. I mean, I was trying to catch it when it came on TV, but I was probably working when it was on TV. And I didn't watch a lot of television while I was working. So it's not as exciting as it should have been, I guess.
Okay.
It was another job that I was happy to have and went on to the next.
Okay.
It wasn't like it launched my career. It wasn't, I was already doing quite well.
Okay.
And They may have seen me and decided for me to guest star, seen me on some other shows. Joseph Cannell was one of the big producers I remember, and I'm sure I did a lot of his shows, but I cannot recall which ones were his.
Okay. And Daphne, you mentioned there about somebody, you mentioned about Mr. T in terms of your interactions with T. And I suppose another big star, and obviously you're probably well aware of him growing up as a child with Breakfast and Tiffany's, Audrey Hepburn, the one and only, the great George Peppard. And an awful lot of comments we've done so far about George is a mixed bag in terms of people's reactions or interactions with George. Some have good things to say about George Peppard. Some people have not very nice things to say about George Peppard in terms of when they met him or they were introduced to him, in terms of, dare I say, his friendliness towards them. Did you ever get to speak a line or mention a sentence offset with George Peppard, or share a few words with him at all during your time on the 18?
I probably was introduced to him and said hello, and that was about it. No, I don't have any bag for George Peppard. I don't know him, and I never spent any time with him.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of when you found out you were going to appear on the A Team, and in terms of that principal episodes, obviously you mentioned T, and T was a big deal, but what was George probably the other big star in your head that you would have liked to have shared some lines with, compared to the maybe Dirk or Dwight, or were you just happy to share lines with anyone that in terms of on that set, or had you ideas of who you might want to be on set with?
I had no ideas about who I wanted to be on set with. I was there to work, do my lines, make my scenes, sing, and I was going to work and coming home. I had been married to my new husband for that was the first 3 years of our marriage. We had kids to deal with. I went to work and I came home. It wasn't like I was trying to be in scenes with people.
Okay.
I was just going to work. I'm sorry.
No problem. And I suppose, Daphne, in terms of your character, Kamara, she seems a strong, sort of feisty woman, and sort of appeal to that African descent. And how did you want to play her? Because obviously this is an actress this is a character that is deep in sort of Central Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, that type of area. Had you an idea of how you wanted to play that sort of character? Did you want her to bring out her African roots or African heritage, or put a bit of twang or twist to her voice, or had you any ideas on how you wanted her to come across on TV?
I had been to Zimbabwe in 1981.
Okay,
And
wow.
I was not trying to emulate anything from that region. I was trying to be centered in the fact that she was a strong woman who could have been anywhere in Africa or China or anywhere. A strong woman who knew her job and knew what she was supposed to do. I didn't need to I asked, did they want some sort of lilt in my accent? And they said, no, that's fine. Just do it straight. So that's probably what I did. I really don't remember.
Yeah, no problem, Daphne. It's well over 50 years now in
Yeah.
terms, yeah. And I suppose, Daphne, those shows in the 80s, especially the A Team, it's macho ism, it's dare I say, it's full of testosterone, the A Team. It's a guy show, it's a guy's flick, it's full of action, young pretty women, interactions, sort of storylines for that. And did you sort of do a good lot of those roles in the 80s, and were you sort of comfortable with those guy type TVs? Did you know what you were getting yourself into when you were on those sort of shows, that it was going to be all action paced with fast action type of characters, and then obviously pretty women, and the sort of dare I say, testosterone driven?
I was one of the pretty women. Thank goodness I was there to take that job. No, it didn't matter to me that it was testosterone driven. I wasn't producing the show, so they could do what they wished. Simon and Simon was quite a testosterone driven show as well. And I had done many episodes with them. And it was just fun being around folks that were having a good time doing what they were doing.
Yeah. And Daphne, in terms of cult classic sort of shows, the A-Team is revered now in terms of its popularity. And obviously they tried to do a spin-off in terms of movie, which flops big time, obviously, because they tried to recreate a legacy sort of show. And many of those shows of the 70s and 80s, we think of Starsky and Hutch, we think of Dukes of Hazzard, we think of Rockford Files, we think of MacGyver, we think of the Tom Selleck show of the 80s as well. The name's not coming to my head now at the
Me
moment.
either.
Yeah. But fantastic sort of TV shows steeped in legacy in terms of gold. But why do you think it's when people try and touch these 20 or 30 years ago that the Hollywood producers, that they never seem to go well in terms of trying to recreate sort of classic sort of TV series? We've seen remakes of Starsky and Hutch, Dukes of Hazzard, in terms of movies, the A-Team, all have sort of flopped big time. Do you think it's a case that maybe that they've taken shows that were really popular with a generation and they've tried and make them too comedic or too jovial in their sort of appearances, and that's maybe angered the fan base?
No, I think that the shows that we shot in the 80s were of their time. And it had to do with being in context with what was going on in the world and how people were living and thinking at that time. And if you take those shows out of that context and try to place them in a different context with different sensibilities, they're not going to work because people will not grasp them from the same kind of vision that they had 10 years before or 20 years before. You can't take something that was iconic and just plunk it somewhere else and think that it's going to work. It's not going to work because it doesn't have the sensibilities that are currently in use. There are a lot of shows that you could not make now because of the political correctness of the world that you could make back then. It was before women started to speak up about harassment and power. And you can't do that anymore without repercussion from a more sensitive audience.
Yeah.
So I would not try to recreate something that worked then and expect it to work now. In the case of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, they could not recreate that as a sitcom, but to change the whole tone of it by doing it as a 1-hour episode that has more time to see the 360s of the characters, to see more of what they're made of day to day, to flesh them out more than we were able to do in a half-hour sitcom, is an excellent way, I think, to take that iconic story and bring it into the present. But it would never work as it did back in the 90s.
Yeah. So true. I can imagine them trying to make a Married with Children there today with Al Bundy in the 20th century.
Wow.
It would cause an awful lot of upstir, but such was his
Yes.
time in the late
Yes.
80s and 90s. It was just perfect for that time.
It's the context. It is where the world is now, and one must address the world in film and television as it is now and stop trying to reach back and recreate something that was of another time.
And Daphne, speaking about time in terms of the present time for you, what's life like at the moment? Are you still fairly active? How are you spending these current days in terms of your time in Los Angeles or California? Is that where you're based at present?
No, I'm on the East Coast. I
Okay.
left California in 1989.
Okay.
I only work there. I don't live there.
Okay.
And we are on strike now, so there's no episodic television being shot. I was busy until the spring when we went on strike. So I've been spending my time doing local news television shows and exercising my other talents, which are photography and designing. So I've been writing books and making note cards and calendars and sewing up custom coats and the things that I do when I'm not working on television.
Okay. And Daphne Reid, for the final sort of 30 seconds to summarize your experience on the A team, if I could turn it over to you and I could say, if I could ask you two sentences in terms of your memories of working on the sentence on the A team in January the 29th, 1985, appearing on Skins, season 3, episode 17 as Kamara Kaboko, and the previous year appearing as a nurse in There's Always the Catch. What would you like those two sentences to read in terms of Daphne Reid's experience on the A team?
Daphne Reid was blessed to have had the opportunity to work on those two shows and to express herself in the context of whatever they were shooting, and to be able to show the world that a Black woman could exist in many, many different situations and be a strong character and bring pride to herself and to her family.
Okay, Daphne, fantastic. And don't forget the monkey as well, dare I say, in terms of he's appears he's still always on that shoulder. He still always he probably gives you nightmares every time the night you wake up at 2 o'clock and you just imagine